being with us. Just a few housekeeping. There's bathrooms to the back of you, to the left, towards the exit. And there's also a emergency exit if we need to exit the building for any reason. Hopefully that will not be necessary. So kindly ask you to reach down with your purses and jackets and silence your phone so that we can better connect with the guardian angels, allowing this next few hours to be truly healing as they are already here with us today, working on our spiritual treatment. We will start with an inspirational message from Living Spring, followed by initial prayer, and then we'll have short talks, a short break until we start our spiritual treatment. So I hope that you enjoy our program today, and I will pass the word to Eric.
Hello. From Living Spring, number 107. Let us renew ourselves each day. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you can prove what is the good, pleasing, and perfect will of God. Paul, Romans 12:2. The apparent transformation of our personality on the outside does no good. More titles, more financial resources, more potential for comfort, and better social possibilities can merely increase our responsibilities. Let us renew ourselves on the inside. We must advance in superior knowledge, even if it costs us sweat and tears. Accepting the problems of the world and overcoming them by means of the power of our labor and serenity is the best formula for acquiring discernment. Pain, sacrifice, affliction, and suffering are processes of sublimation that the greater world offers us so that our spiritual vision may increase. Material comforts often stagnate our minds if we cannot overcome the fascinating perils of worldly advantages. Let us renew ourselves each day by studying the lessons of the pioneers of progress and by living under the inspiration of incessant service. Let us apply ourselves to building a balanced life wherever we may be, but let us not forget that it is only by fulfilling our duties in the consecration of the good that we can grasp what life is, and with it, the understanding of what God's perfect will for us is.
Thank you. All right, so I ask you now to close our eyes, kindly repeating mentally the words of the prayer, amplifying our request to talk to our dear Lord. Dear Mother, Father God, we are here today to serve your will. We are thankful for the opportunity to be together in the celebration of the 150 years of the book Genesis. We extend our gratitude to our dear Allan Kardec, whose work has fructified all the books that today enlighten our pathways. May all of us in both realms of life feel loved and cared for by our guardian angels. May the grace of our Master Jesus, who guides our work, descend upon the sky, covering, bathing each and every one of us. May all the speakers be guided by the guardian angels, allowing our words to be of service, of healing to the incarnate and discarnate friends who are suffering. May you bless us. May you guide us throughout our meeting. And we ask you for your permission to begin today's session. And so be it. Thank you, friends. Welcome the ones who are new. I'm Shane Martin. And I'm really honored to be here today speaking my humble words about the words of Kardec. Most importantly, very thankful to have the friends from the Spirit Society of Virginia with us today who kindly drove all the way from Chantilly, Virginia. They also coordinate the efforts of Kardec Radio. And if you are ever in the area in Northern Virginia or in DC, check out the works that they do monthly in Washington, D.C., starting weekly next year. And also there are many weekly and bi-weekly activities on the Spirit Society of Virginia if you are in that area. In Richmond, we meet every Wednesday at 7 p.m. to study the Spirit's book, and once a month we conduct similar workshops to what you're seeing. So today, I am humbled to be talking to you about the book Genesis from Allan Kardec. So we are deeply indebted to the works of Kardec, who, according to Emmanuel, had a mission of enlightenment and consolation. He also says in the book, On the Way to the Light, that he would be accompanied by a plethora of companions and collaborators, and his task was difficult and complex. Yet, he made a choice of being diligent to his work so that we could be here today. So, no words are deeply thankful beings that all the work that he did, and also his wife, Amélie, who supported him, has allowed us to be here today. So these are the five to celebrate today. In January of 1868, the book Genesis was published. So we are in celebration of the book, 150 years of this book, published 1 year before Allan Kardec. We are here today to talk about understanding miracles. Also, there are other works that Kardec has published that are not on this slide. But importantly, coincidentally or not, we will be officially 2 years of age in a few days. The group has existed with the help of Vanessa and Carlos since 2008 in different combinations of folks. But Kardec was also born in October, so things do happen for a reason, and we're meeting today to understand a little bit about miracles. But before we understand miracles in the light of Spiritism, what is a miracle, right? So what is the definition of a miracle? Miracle comes from the root of, stay still so that people can see me on the camera, from mirari, which is to admire. And usually a miracle is something extraordinary that manifests divine intervention in human affairs. That's the definition. An extremely outstanding or unusual thing or accomplishments. In the works of the religious institutions, in the theological sense, miracle is something extremely extraordinary that is not repeated and that we cannot explain by using our natural laws. Now, we can explain physical laws. We all understand, gravity, speed, velocity, all the physical laws of the universe has emerged to explain things that before we didn't know what it was. So magnetism, gravity, electricity, right? So before events that we can explain today, before they weren't explainable to the common folk. But as science evolved and explains how the physical laws act on the material as we see, then we also have the spirit science who will bring to us more explanations on the laws and the spiritual principle. So by the church and by the religious, it has to be very unusual, a miracle. So what we have is a supernatural event that does not occur within the natural laws, unusual, isolated, and exceptional, and you can't explain it. That implies that some divine outside being is producing the miracles. By the theological sense, God's intervention. So only God can explain or produce miracles in the theological sense. Yet, we have Spiritism. And Kardec brings to us that Spiritism does not perform miracles. He says, why? Because the moment you can replicate something over and over again, now you can explain it by a law, and if you can reproduce it, now it's not unusual anymore. Therefore, spirit science, so what does Spiritism bring us? It gives us new laws, the laws of the spiritual principle, right? explains the phenomena within the phenomena we call miracles within the jurisdiction of the laws of the spiritual principle. It also demonstrates that the spirit phenomena is one of the living forces of the nature. So before we couldn't see, or most of us cannot see the spirits, and they act on physical laws that we may not understand, that explain that spirit phenomena. We're going to see some phenomena to the realm that brings to us this compilation of knowledge brought by the spirits to him. He compiled everything so that we would remove miracles from the extraordinary and goes into spirituality. So we can't explain with physical laws at the time. Now it's got to be mystical and supernatural. And then Spiritism pushes it even further and say, no, we can explain that. Well, why do people think of the spirit phenomena seems supernatural to people? So if you're talking about something we're talking about later, healings, why does when someone gets healed out of nowhere, quote unquote, why does it seem supernatural? That's because we're used to explaining things with the physical laws, because it's produced with the help of agents that are not the same as we are. So we're not manipulating matter the way we know it. So we can't see it, it's invisible. It could not be studied by the current science of the time. Then they said, well, it's got to be supernatural. Then Kardec asks, as more laws are explained by science, the spirit science and the physical science, but do we know all the laws of the universe? Even if we saw a phenomena today that may be supernatural, it may be that we still don't know the mechanisms behind it. Yet Spiritism will bring to us the spirit phenomena as revealing the existence of the soul, its survival after death, its individuality. So now we have the agent that causes the phenomena that people used to call miracles in the theological sense. So we remove that from the supernatural that cannot be explained to something more tangible that the majority may not see, but it's still there, it's still spirit. So you and I are spirits, right? And then the spirit phenomena is different modes of the manifestation of the spirits, and it can be produced by incarnate beings and discarnate beings, souls or spirits, depending on. But because it reveals certain aspects, it has certain characteristics, Kardec's bring to us that they are not supernatural or extraordinary, because they're produced by spirits. So let's recap. Before we thought it was unnatural, extraordinary, we couldn't explain. Then science started explaining some phenomena like electricity, magnetism, gravity. And then now we're like, oh, it gotta be some divine force. Now Spiritism is bringing to us that the so-called miracles are actually actions of spirits within the realm of the physical realm that we don't see. But let's recap. What is a spirit? So we're talking about the agents that produces the phenomena. So what is a spirit? You and I are spirits. We are souls incarnated. Our brothers and sisters who are in the audience that we can't perceive, in a sense, are spirits. So spirit's a soul that has survived the body. So when you and I pass away, on the friends on the internet, and not if but when we pass away, we will find out that in the spirit realm, the spirit world, primitive and first, we have survived our physical body that we are so blessed to be here today with, so that we can learn and grow and have all the trials and tasks that we have to do, even though it may be difficult. But spirits act upon matter by means of its perispirit. So even you and I here, we have spirits, a spirit that is enveloped by the perispirit. And our spirit acts upon our physical body through the perispirit. So there's the intermediary agent. So spirits do what they used to do incarnated. So if they like to read, they go read. If they like to play, they go play. So on and so forth. So whatever you and I like to do, most likely if we discarnated right now, we would continue and go towards that, because it's your attraction. Mentally, you and emotionally going to be attracted to whatever you're creating now. We're going to see that with a beautiful talk from Carol. But then when necessary, use the physical body over the incarnate. So when it's doing that, it's using an intermediary that we call a medium, right? So it may be that in the times of Kardec, the tables were rapping, and then there were mediums in the room that were capable of producing those physical effects. So the spirits were using them as a means of communicating with us. But yeah, the phenomenon may have seemed supernatural to some people, because tables don't have brains, so they couldn't be wrapping or moving around. And spirits are subject to the laws that govern the spiritual principles. So when we talk about our physical bodies are earth and the universe, the physical laws of the universe, which is still God's laws of the universe. God created the laws. So the spirit phenomena can be spontaneous or intentional. So it may be that you are a medium and you don't know, and then you're in a room and some physical phenomena occurs, a noise, a sound, something moves. You're not aware, then that's spontaneous. A spirit's using you as the vehicle of that manifestation. Or intentional. Someone may be a healing medium. We know a few of those. And then intentionally, when you come here, there may be a session where they're able to communicate with their guides and be a vessel of energy, of fluidic energy that will heal someone. So that's an intentional act. And what Kardec mentions is the majority of the spirit phenomena is actually spontaneous or unconscious. And then mediums can precipitate this event. So even if you don't know, you may be bringing in some sort of phenomena and you can't explain it, and it turns out that you may be a medium. You don't know. And in the medium's book, we see we all mediums to some extent. Very mild because we notice the intervention of spirits in our lives. We have able to perceive the presence of our guardian angels, so on and so forth. And some other folks have a more ostensive mediumship. But mediums do not produce anything supernatural. Therefore, mediums do not perform miracles. So we started with a concept that is really unusual, really out there, that God has to come down and do, to the point that we say, well, because we can explain, we know the mechanism, we know the agent, we know the agent's the spirits, the fact, the spirit phenomena, then now we say mediums do not perform miracles. Even if someone walked in and we healed them, quote unquote, out of nowhere, we can't explain. Science at the time may not explain, medicine may not explain, yet it's not a miracle. It has background, it has science behind it. And like Kardec said before, we don't know all the laws of the universe. Just because we can't explain today doesn't mean in 100 years, 200 years, we won't be able to. So the knowledge we have today is the knowledge we need now to progress within the realm of the earth and the spirits that are here. Hopefully in the future, as we move to a world of regeneration, we will bring in more scientific knowledge, medical knowledge, astrophysical knowledge, all kinds of knowledge that we need to progress, right? And he says, spirit phenomena has existed for all times. So it's not something new that started with the Fox sisters in 1858, when the first manifestations occurred in the United States. But it has occurred since time. And at the end today, we're going to learn about healings that Jesus did and other phenomena. If you read the books of the Bible, the event is there, the phenomena is there. But before, people may have thought it was from God, and now we can explain it with knowledge. So it's important for us to analyze and study these books. And I should have showed to you, but my book is the book Genesis, because the first part is Genesis of things in general, the world, the people. And the second part is miracles, is what we study. The third part is predictions of the future. Now let's go back to God. Can God perform miracles? Do you think? God being the supreme intelligence of the universe, all just, good, all powerful, omnipotent, immaterial, all loving and kind. If God wanted, excuse my language of anthropomorphizing God, but if you wanted, you could, right? Well, Kardec says, of course, God could, but God hasn't. Why? Because a miracle, by definition, has to break a law. You have to go outside the natural law, break a law, a physical law, to occur. But if God were to perform a miracle, God would break its own law that it created. But because it creates perfect laws, then God cannot perform miracles. Does that make sense? So when you read this chapter, it's very rational and logical. So if miracles are unusual and extraordinary, but now you can repeat it, because a medium may be able to repeat the same thing over and over again. Now you've got to be governed by a law. And if it's a law, we can explain. If we explain a law, we find the fact and the cause of it. So it's not a miracle anymore per definition. So he says, God does not perform miracles because since the divine laws are perfect, he has no need to derogate or deviate from them. And God has no need to show us that it's powerful. Right? So what does Spiritism teach us? A little out of order, but the immutable laws of God that affect both the spiritual and the material principle. If you go back to the Spirit's book, we have the triad God, Spirit, and matter. So both the Spirit has its own set of spiritual laws, spiritual principle, and matter has its own set of laws. All both immutable, meaning you can't change. You and I cannot change. God has already made it for us. We don't need to change. But Kardec invites us to do something that is interesting. He said, let's take back the definition of miracle as something wonderful, extraordinary. And he says, God's action is in all that is around us. So he says, look around. Literally outside of yourself. And if you look around this beautiful autumn day, the rain is a miracle. The leaves falling in the United States is a miracle. Go inside yourself. The cells of your body are miracles. The fact that you can breathe in oxygen, breathe out carbon dioxide, and now you can think about those molecules bathing your entire cell and moving around you on your vessels and arteries. So that's a miracle in and of itself. It's a blessed miracle because we are here and we've been given this opportunity. So he says, go look around. There's everything that is miraculous in a sense, created by God, is all around you. So you don't need to go and invent some divine intervention for something. All you have to do is observe what's around us. And Spiritism brings to us that is not something that we can explain. It's actually, it follows very logical, rational laws. Alright, so that's my part on understanding miracles, and I'll leave you with our master for now as we switch into Carol's talk. So, if you excuse me just a second, so that I can open her stuff. Do you know what I should have done? Is it? So Carol is a member of the Spirit Society of Virginia, the Spirit Society of Washington, D.C., a coordinator of the program for youth and children at SSVA, and host of Kardec Radio for Teens and for Kids.
Co-host.
Co-host.
Kardec Radio for Teens, yes, with Bia Lopez.
Oh yes, Bia, of course, Bia. And she's a wonderful speaker. She will guide us towards her talk right now.
Thank you, Shane. So I would also like to extend our gratitude to Kardec because ever since Spiritism came to life, we no longer have the duality that we used to for centuries. We no longer have to choose between reason and faith. We now can have both. And one of the reasons why we can have both is because one of the laws, immutable laws, as Shane has pointed out to us, that is revealed through Kardec's wonderful systematic studies of the divine laws, is that our very thoughts can create life and can create the so-called miracles, because we are divine beings in our very own essence. So as divine beings, we are too co-creators of God's miracles. This is why Jesus Christ, our Lord and Master, has said, you are gods, you are light, you shall do what I do and even more. Why? Because within our thoughts, our essence, we too can connect to God. This is why our very thoughts are also co-creators of life. It's a miracle! miracle. You may be wondering, but how? What is the systematic terms in which miracles happen? How do we bridge reason and faith? How do we do that? In the book Genesis, whose coming to life we are celebrating this year, Kardec and the illuminated spirits show to us that all of us are recipients, are vehicles of the cosmic fluid. What do they mean by that? They mean that God, being the source of all forms of life, provides us with life itself. Because God is the supreme intelligence of the universe, and it doesn't have a physical shape. It provides us with the spirit, with the immortal selves that we are. This immortal self doesn't have a physical shape. We temporarily have one because we need it as a learning experience, but we are not necessarily the body. Who are we? We are this cosmic fluid that temporarily takes the shapes that are necessary for our own growth. Quantum physics today can already prove that. But Kardec was so ahead of his time that more than 100 years ago, he already documented that. If you would like to know how, please read the Genesis. But this is a little preview for you. So every time we think, we produce, we co-create. These fluids take shape and come to life, literally. Would you like to know how? Yes? Good. So here's an example. Another miracle. In the book, Missionaries of the Light, by the great reporter of the Beyond, Spirit Dr. André Lewis, through the blessed mediumship of Francisco Cândido Xavier, we learn how thoughts come to life. We learn about Marcondes. Marcondes is a spiritist, a practicing spiritist, like all of us here incarnated in this room. He was connected to a spiritist center, and during his physical sleep, he had the opportunity to practice what we call intelligent sleep. What is that? It's the opportunity to be of service while our physical bodies rest. How is that possible? Because only the physical body rests. The spirit doesn't need to rest. Our real selves, immortal selves, can keep on serving and learning. So he was actually matriculated, Marcondes, in a course on the Beyond, a course much like this, only for spirits that were partially freed from the physical body or completely freed from the physical body. His assistant teacher came to check on him, like many of our mentors do every night. When they arrived in his humble abode, they realized that he was actually trapped there. How? By 3 discarnate women. How so? During the day, he engaged in a behavior that is very much sanctioned by our society currently. That behavior was flirting, especially for men in our society. That is glorified. Oh, he's proving his masculinity. He's so charming. Let him play. He's just playing. Well, in reality, that is not so. Because according to the universal laws, we are not playing anytime that we think. Anytime that we produce thought, we are actually creating life. So what happened to him? He flirted, quote-unquote, innocently, apparently. But then at night, when his body was freed from matter partially, the 3 women that he flirted with came after him. They actually met with him in his own bedroom and said, oh, let's have fun together. So then when the mentor came, he said to Marcondes, what would you like me to tell your teacher? And Marcondes was like, ooh, I'm so sorry. Don't look at me now, I'm so ashamed. And the three discarnate women said, he called us here. I'm going to repeat that. He called us here. How? Through his thought. The three women actually connected to him and literally materialized in his bedroom. He called us here. So then André Lewis said, can't we do something? Can we wake him up? Can we set him free? No, we cannot. Because it was his choice. He has to learn through his choice. His thoughts created his experience. So next time you think of a brownie, for example, be careful. Because according to what Allan Kardec documents in the Genesis, whatever we think becomes a painted scenario that is three-dimensional, that has shape, that has smell, that has texture, and we are halfway there, much like our friend Marcondes. So we learn through the spirit mentor André Lewis that our thoughts can actually create. Oh, did I turn it off? Sorry. Another miracle needs to happen now. Thank you. I can do it. Thank you. And what else can our thoughts do? They can create all kinds of life. Another example of a situation that was documented by the spirit doctor André Lewis is reported in the book Action and Reaction, also dictated through Francisco Cândido Xavier. In this book, we learn something quite impressive. The power of thought comes to life yet again. We learn that in the spiritual realm, there are actual schools of Avengers, believe it or not, that can actually be trained to manipulate our thoughts. How so? In the book Genesis by Allan Kardec, he tells us that discarnate spirits obviously don't have hands that they can manipulate objects with. So what are their quote-unquote hands? Their thoughts. So through their thoughts, they can actually manipulate situations, circumstances, and individuals. But how does that happen? You may be wondering. Through our habitual desires. Those are words taken by Kardec. What does Kardec mean by habitual desires? He is now referring to desires, wishes that are so strongly alive within our hearts that we think about them again and again, day in and day out. They may be something that we think about the moment we wake up until the moment we go to sleep. So they become a habit. They become who we are. They become part of our identity. And what happens to us when we have such kind of desires? The picture you see on the screen is of Lewis. Lewis is one of the central cases reported in the book Action and Reaction. Lewis is so obsessed with financial resources, having financial resources. He's so habitually trained in his mind to think about financial resources that actually when he goes to sleep and his body is at rest, his spirit partially leaves the body and actually goes count bills, literally. He sits at his desk, much as the picture shows, and he literally spends the night counting money. And one of the spirits, the scarlet spirits that is connected to Lewis because of the desire, habitual desire for wealth, says to Andre Lewis, "Would you like to see how I can manipulate his thinking?" Andre Lewis then says, like a curious, wonderful spiritual teacher says, "You can do that?" And he says, "Absolutely. Would you like to see?" Andre Lewis says, "Of course." So then the spirit, Leonel, who is connected to Lewis, visualizes a farm and says, "You, to Lewis, want to have this farm. This farm must be yours." That thought is projected like in this screen. Much like you were seeing this PowerPoint presentation, Lewis then sees the image of the farm and absorbs it. And then thinks that the desire for the farm is his, when in fact it wasn't his, it was Leonel's. But because of the habitual desire for wealth, Leonel, as a discarnate spirit, was able to manipulate Lewis's own thoughts to then harvest in him that desire even further. So the question that the spirit mentors through Kardec leave to us right now is, what may be our very own central desire? Because according to the reports in the book Action and Reaction, this is how we enter into psychic delirium, which is the process of obsession, the negative persistent influence from discarnate or incarnate spirits. So the question is, ta-da! What might be our very own central desire? Because that habitual desire is the water that will allow our thoughts to grow, manifest, and create life. Our minds are like a garden, and our thoughts are like the water that allows the garden to harvest. So what are we harvesting? I would like to bring to our attention the spirit mentor Emmanuel. He was the mentor of Chico Xavier. And in this book, 2,000 years ago, as you can see on the screen, he reports one of his many incarnations. This incarnation is one where he was a very wealthy politician named Publio Lentulus. And what happens here? In the first chapter of the book, Emmanuel himself describes him having a conversation with his best friend. And he shows to his friend that he had a dream that night where he remembered another lifetime where he was a senator, a politician. And in that life, he had taken the lives of many others and abused power. And yet again, he saw himself in the same position. And as we read the book further, we see that he failed that test yet again. Why did he fail? Because his central desire was wealth, and through his thought processes that repeated yet the same pattern from one reincarnation to the next, he was unable to renew himself, as in the message read by Eric. A reincarnation is an opportunity for us to renew ourselves. But Publio Lentulus was unable to do that because his central desire for power and wealth was so great that he recreated through his thoughts the same failed experiences yet again. So the question for us to meditate upon is, now that we know that one of the universal laws that we live by is that we can co-create life with God through our thoughts, our central question for us to meditate upon is, what might be our central desire? And as we meditate upon that and think about our own abilities to harvest life, let us seek the good within ourselves, because if we want to create a new life and renew ourselves, as Eric pointed out, we need to seek the good. This is a phrase by Emmanuel from chapter 10 from the book Thought and Life, called Understanding. If we want to renew ourselves and harvest the new through the power of our thoughts, we shall seek the good, visualize the good, and mold the good with all the resources that we have at hand. So I will now leave you with an embrace from the Master.
Friends, now we move into mechanism of healing with our dear friend Vanessa. Vanessa is the founder and former president of the Spirit Society of Baltimore. She's the current president and founder of the Spirit Society of Virginia and the Spirit Society of Washington. Plus, she founded the Kardec Radio. She's a wonderful fifth generation spiritist who is always willing to help us for our spirited endeavor. So I welcome Vanessa to.
Thank you. Just making sure. All right. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Stretch. Is that a good time to stretch?
Yeah.
Feel free to stretch, stand up. Don't make too much noise, the baby's sleeping. Right? The newest member of the Spiritism side of Richmond, Manuela. Right? The world awaits. Right? What a joy it is. Imagine when Jesus came to the earth in the flesh and people didn't get it. But he never gave up. And here we are, recapping the promises that he gave to us. Like the promise consoler. Spiritism is the promise consoler. And this year, as Shane mentioned, we are celebrating 150 years of the last book that Kardec published, the Genesis. This book completes in its 150 years the whole publishing of the main books of Kardec. So we did like one round, 150 round, all of them, a little more for the Spirit's book, of course. It's been 161 years, but it's clear to us that the earth is entering a new moment, because with all the science we have at hand, none of these books have been debunked, which is quite surprising. Because many people claim, I'm so rational. I'm so rational. I cannot believe in these things. Okay, so Paul, as we're talking about mechanisms before we enter, Paul in Paul of Tarsus, he mentioned something in that regard. The two type of people that actually have a hard time absorbing these teachings. And they exist in two realms of life. The incarnates and the discarnates. And he says, and this is in the book Paul and Stephen, page 625, chapter, let me see if they have the chapter here. the chapter, I'll give it to you later, because these chapters are quite long, I'm not so sure, or am I? It's always good to give a better reference, forgive me. I'll give it to you in a minute. It's page 625 of this edition, and it says, there are two classes of individuals for whom the renewing contact with Jesus is most difficult, and it still remains. The first, he says, I saw in Athens, and it comprised of individuals poisoned by the world's erroneous knowledge. Those who are crystallized in an imaginary superiority, the ones who claim that they are so rational, and who think much of themselves. In my opinion, says Paul of Tarsus, these are the most unfortunate. And currently, since 2013, Neuroscience published a few papers, one of them we've mentioned recently at the Spirit side of Virginia, when scientists shows to us that our problems in life decision making begin when we decode wrongly. That's what he's saying, erroneous knowledge. The way we are encoding it, bringing the stimulus in, is not, the interpretation of it inside is not correct. That's the fallacy. And thus, the pushing away of these teachings. No, because this means that I'm not going to be rational. Actually, as Shane and Carol have already presented to us, the Genesis by Kardec is a masterpiece in logical and rational thinking. It becomes almost undisputable, if and only if we give ourselves an opportunity. The second type of individual that have a hard time with the renewing contact with Jesus is comprised of the recalcitrant Jews at his time, who, possessing a precious legacy from the past, do not understand faith without religious battles. They are hardened in the pride of the Jewish race and persevere in an erroneous interpretation of God. Time and again, we're going to see that the understanding is blinded by the way people are interpreting the teachings. We can only begin to understand the mechanisms of healing with an open mindset, because Spiritism is going to show to us a new understanding, since Shane brought to us a new take on miracles. And based on that foundation, when we talk about healings, we're talking about mechanisms of the divine law that happens in life. But how do they happen? So there is a two-way approach for us to talk about the mechanisms. One is from the point of view of the ones who are instruments of the healing. We talk about them as healers, healing mediums. How does this happen? And the other one is from the perspective of the one who is being healed, who is experiencing the healing. All of us. All of us. There's nobody on this earth who is not in a true program of healing. So what we're going to see here has this two way of understanding. The first one for us is from the perspective of all of us, like, I want to be healed. The infirmities, the diseases that happen in the physical body, we're talking about mental illnesses included, they do not happen only in the physical. The physical is simply a rough image of something that is happening in the true body, the spiritual body. And the book Genesis dedicates a whole chapter to the perispirit, making us understand our main body. You know, some people nowadays like to talk about fashion design, right? And it's interesting that we read this part of the book to understand about the fashion of the spiritual body. Huh? It's inexpensive. The best part of it all. But it's labor intensive. You cannot buy elsewhere. You don't need a stylist. That's bad. If you're a stylist, you'll be out of job. Because in the spiritual realm, we cannot ask somebody to dress us up. Because it depends, as Carol showed to us. It depends on our minds. André Luiz, in all of his books, he shows to us that we will be dressed up spiritually in our spiritual body, the perispirit. We will show our appearance depends 100% on our thoughts. So it's beautiful when Carol is mentioning about André Luiz' cases on flirtation, because as André Luiz shows in his books, and one of them is in the realms of mediumship, when we see somebody getting out of, like emancipating, the technical term is the out-of-body experience in Spiritism has a technical term, emancipation. So when we see somebody who is incarnated emancipating through the time of sleep, they don't look as they are in the physical body. Have you been curious about it, how you look like? You know, a good exercise? Because there is, we talk about internet, about the leg, when we're transmitting something like this, a cardiac radar. But there is a gap between how we think and how things actually feel or are. A good exercise is using arts. So if you want to form a picture about how we look like, it's not too hard. You put a list. Which type of music I feel would translate my vibrational pattern? Pick you choose it. Pick a choice. Oh, heavy metal, good luck, because that's not too beautiful, sorry to say it. But that's one. Two, take a piece of paper, crayons or color pencils, and draw. Pick some colors and draw something that you feel like you're representing as a vibratory being. As Kardec says in the book, the Spirit's book, a flame. We're like a flame, the Spirits say, a divine flame, for lack of better terms. So draw it. And in a month, 2 months, 10 years, 20 years, if you do it all over again, we'll see it changed, hopefully. If it didn't, then we need to reincarnate fast. Because sometimes we're reincarnated, but we're not reincarnated. And then we need, sometimes people can use Play-Doh. And you can, craft something like a form that you feel would represent you spiritually speaking. So any artistic exercise, you can even think about a perfume. What kind of fragrance? Think about flowers, and if you know flowers enough, what kind of fragrance would represent you in your vibratory emanations. Because Chico Xavier himself, people report that coming close to him, it was like coming close to a garden of flowers. He would offer coffee cups to people, and people would feel the perfume. And they were like, where is it coming from? In togetherness with the spirits around. So when we're talking about mechanisms of healing, we're talking about ourselves in our infinite unfoldment of our divine potential. But why do we need healing, right? Why do we need healing? Because there is a form of disease, and we know that the word disease means something that is not ease, going with ease. It's the opposite, dis-ease. So where are we stuck? There's a point, stagnation, like we call sometimes a crystallization. Well, if we go straight to the point from the Genesis to the continuation of the science of the spirits unfolded in Andrea Luiz in Evolution in Two Worlds, we're gonna see clear cut that our previous lives explain previous experiences, sometimes in this life, as in the Gospel according to Spiritism. Chapter 5, present causes of suffering, past causes of suffering. And the spirits reveal, most of us will resent the consequences of this life. But we don't watch out. Like we eat a lot, end up with diabetes, and it's karma. No, it's not karma. It's because we are not watching. Not only the amount, but each body needs a different type of food. And one day I asked Divaldo Franco, in 2006, Divaldo, why are so many kids being born with food allergies? We've never seen that. We haven't seen that before at the scale that we're seeing nowadays. And he's saying, not to be simplistic, because the food industry has their touch on it, we know. But he says, it's a call to discipline. If you have allergy, there's no other way. Don't eat it, or else. So it's saying discipline yourself. So when I have a child who has diabetes, some parents say, oh, poor them. No, it's good for them, because God wants them to be disciplined. Lucky them that they are under a strict program, because they are going to advance faster. Who says it? Me? No. Jesus in the book, Jesus in the Home. When we are under a strict regimen, he says, even authoritarian regimen, we may progress faster. And nowadays the world is experiencing an alarming rate of aversion for discipline. Anybody who talks a little bit about order, they're like, no order, hippie society, peace and love, whatever way. And then we see the chaos that we're seeing in many countries in the world, where there's no order, no discipline. So the causes of infirmity, says the Spirit, are in previous choices. But how does it happen? But they reveal to us. How does it begin? Where does it begin? And they explain to us. The morbid predisposition that we may have, they begin, and morbid predisposition in the sense of being susceptible to diseases, they begin when we, and this is fascinating, Andrea Luiz reveals in chapter 19, part 2 of the book Evolution in Two Worlds. It begins in our perispirit. Everything. And he says, when we make a grave mistake, again, between making a mistake and understanding how grave it is, there is what we call perception. Some people may commit grave mistakes and yet excuse themselves, feeling like it's no mistake at all. But if they just knew that it doesn't depend on somebody else, that it depends on our calibration with the divine laws that are imprinted in us. It's as if we have a mental computer and there is a program and there is a virus and we are not intercepting it, but it's doing stuff, and if we don't watch out, it may corrupt a lot in our system. So that's why reading these books, studying Spiritism, helps us calibrate. Because many people out there are not aware. There is a big difference between the divine laws imprinted in us and the awareness of them. Spiritism wakes us up and says, did you know that you cannot park here or you're gonna receive a citation? No, I didn't. I've been parking there all my life. Oh. And Spiritism said, don't do it. Did you know? And then we start putting awareness where we didn't used to have. So André Luiz is saying, when we make a grave mistake, we create a nodule, he says, like a knot of spiritual disturbance in our spiritual body. We're talking about fashion design, and that's how we create our clothing for our spiritual body. The knot of disturbance is vibrating. It's like a crystallization. Why? Because the system didn't accept it. Who didn't watch Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory? Everybody did at some point, right? Do you remember? There is a room and they're selecting the eggs, and there are eggs that are good or not. So he buzzes and says, good egg, not good egg. Our minds are like this. The system is bringing in the bits of vibratory information, which are our words, feelings, thoughts, actions. It is uploaded. When it goes to the filtering of our actions, feelings, thoughts, and words, gets stuck. Nodule of vibratory disturbance. What happens then? Before we answer to that question, when do we actually predispose ourselves to that stagnation, energetic crystallization? When we make a grave mistake. And that's important to know. You know, grave mistake is like this. You cannot even think about it. It's like, oh, don't talk about it. I don't want to. You bet your spiritual body is there, pulsating in that crystallized knot. I don't want to think about it. You don't need to, because it's there. Sooner or later, we'll have to deal with it. I remember a lady. She was the mother of 4. And when she was in her 40s, she had ovarian cancer. She was a very faithful Catholic woman. Good person. She used to do a lot of good to many people. But when she was diagnosed with cancer, she said, I'm not going to die. I want to see my children growing up and getting married, and I want to see my grandchildren. But the doctor said, you are at a very grave stage now. I don't think you're going to have more than 3 months. She was very poor, but she had good connections at the church. And the church had a retreat center, holistic retreat center somewhere. They said, well, we can send you there. She did, and she really applied herself in the new holistic approach, from psychotherapy to 10,000 other ways. And she said to me, Vanessa, you know what I found out? That I had so much anger towards my mother. I wasn't aware of. I understood why I got sick. Because I didn't want to see what I was feeling for my mother. Because she always preferred my sister. And I swallowed that anger, that hatred, she said. And because I want to live, I am going to deal with it. The mother was deceased. So she started praying for the mother, asking for forgiveness and forgiving, cleansing her emotional aspects, doing the physical therapy. She healed. She couldn't see that grave mistake. But the disease woke her up. Her willingness to live woke her up, and she made the decision, I don't want this any longer. She transmuted her feelings. Her vibrational field changed, and she healed. It's been more than 20-some years that she's experienced that. And she is a beautiful grandmother, devoted, loving, and kind, healed. She couldn't recognize that before the disease. Oh yeah, I love my mom. But when she was faced with the disease, the willingness to live and the knowledge she was presented in that clinic brought to her the awareness that something was off in her mind. We tend to put aside, but Spiritism is saying, don't. Have the courage. No wonder Jesus said, the trademark of the followers of the good news are hope, courage, joy. Courage to see who we are, what we really feel without appearances. Because if we don't, to say the least, the body will tell. And that grave mistake creates a knot, and the memories of them, says André Luiz, the remembrance of it, even if people don't know, we do. And it stays there. Like for suicidal spirits. They reincarnate, and that part of the body that was lesioned brings vibrational memories. The body is going to filter them out. And André Luiz reveals to us the only way to unclog the system is through reincarnation. The physical vessel becomes a filter to send it out, to flush those disturbances out. So the physical body obeys the mental and the perispiritual disposition that we have, and release it out when we have merit. Nobody likes to get sick, but illnesses in the flesh become great friends, reminding us of things we needed to adjust, to learn. But do we need to get sick in order to evolve? No. But that's one of the mechanisms. So the healing begins when the disease is noticeable. Awareness. The healing begins when we observe the disease as a sign of something we need to work upon. Louise Hay, then a genius, a missionary of the spiritual realm on earth when she was incarnated, she left us a legacy, the book, You Can Heal Your Life. It's good that she said your life, not your body. Because we in Spiritism don't talk about the healing of the body. We talk about the immortal healing. And so did she. In her book, at the end of the book, she gives us a list of psychosomatic disorders that is very comprehensive, showing to us thought patterns that generate those illnesses and new thought patterns that may change it. Though she didn't claim herself as being a spiritist, she is in the realm of spiritist thinking, because that is precisely how we understand diseases of the mind and the physical body. That all begins in the spiritual. So, since the laws are written in our conscience, as question and answer 601 of the Spirit's book, we learn that in many ways our connections as spirits, whether we incarnated or not, will bring to us the health or the illness that we are attracting. Other diseases happen when we make friends that are not too clean or too healthy. And people say, oh, it's just a glass of wine. Good luck, my friend, because that day may be the day. Some people say, but that, read the book No Solar. We don't need more than one unaware moment to make a decision that may change our lives forever. We don't need more than one moment to connect to a criminal mind and be persecuted by that mind. I remember a friend one day came to me and said, I became depressed the day I drank a little bit of whiskey. I said, I'm sorry, but I don't believe in that. It doesn't make sense. Your depression was not in the cup. Something in you made you gravitate to that, and you are not alone. And when you drink, you, spirit, enveloped by the spiritual body, connected to the physical, you are opening, emancipating yourself in dangerous ways. Open the pores of your spiritual body to influences that are negative. They come and they may imprison you. Obsessions. So these are the other elements that may cause diseases, obsessions. I'm just putting spiritual because sometimes people don't understand the term we use in Spiritism as obsession, but it's a technical term for this persistent negative influence, as Kardec says in the Medium's book, chapter 23. It's the best reference to understand obsessions. It's like this, oh, I go to the bar. Oh, it's just one thing. Who are the friends there? Happy spirits? I don't think they will be there. But those who rescue us, they may be there, but they cannot intervene in our decisions. They can inspire us in any other sort of environment. So the healing for us, the healing is certainly multidimensional. Oh, when we talk about healing, is the healing of the mind, the spiritual body that envelops the spirit, the physical as a consequence. And when I see somebody who is going through terminal cancer, the healing is already in place. The flushing out of those disturbances, only those who merit go through it. Because there are many people who have a lot of very spiritual lesions that do not yet merit that type of release. They cannot handle it. So you see them, they party, they live the good life, and we think, man, how come, right? Don't envy them. Because our time will come. We have not incarnated for a vacation. And there are people who spend the whole year planning vacations, planning holidays, parties, and give to their children also the illusion that will lead them to decisions that will later turn into illnesses, grave mistakes. So if you want to be healed, the solution is simple. Come to terms with your conscience. That's how the spirits put it out. No wonder all of them say, serve more, serve more, serve more, serve more, and more. And you're sick, more. Like Emmanuel said to Chico, he was bleeding in one eye. And Emmanuel said, what are you doing, Chico? Chico Chave. Don't you see my eye is bleeding? Don't you have two eyes? Emmanuel replied, use the other one. What a mentor, huh? You want a mentor like this? Come to the SSVA. Or stay here in Richmond. But mentor like this says, use the other eye. We cannot indulge. We cannot afford but to say, I will treat myself. Previous choices that, thank God, I do not recall, but I can feel them. And new choices that become more soothing for my soul, calibrating myself for new choices. As they say to us, it's a threefold approach to heal ourselves. When we take remedies, physical remedies, André Luiz even explains to us that in each medication we are going to find a projection of these chemoelectrical elements over our cellular aggregation, stimulating our functions and correcting them. So next time we take a pill, take it with intention to make sure that the direction, vibratorily speaking, is given. Some people say, I take the medication, especially depressed patients. It's not working. But how are you taking it? With belief or disbelief? Are you putting intention onto it or not? And they keep going back to the doctor. The doctors change the medication, yet it doesn't work because they have not put their mind over matter. So we need to do it ourselves. And the spirits reveal to us that psychotherapy is great and it's essential. We cannot heal without changing our thoughts, as Carol showed to us. We want to help our children, Teach them to think beautiful things. Beautiful thoughts all the time. It's not enough to give them enough good food, but good mental food. How do you change from negative thoughts and feelings into positive ones? Still, we need external resources. That's why we say the spiritual treatments, the passes, the water that is brought. We bring a bottle like this. And if people don't have a spiritist center nearby, you can put a glass of water or a bottle of water in front of you, say a prayer, and the good spirits are going to apply spiritual remedies. You drink it. You fill yourself up with renewing energies, like the message that Eric brought to us at the very beginning by Emmanuel. Renewing ourselves. When I go to sleep, I put a glass of water or a bottle of water, say a prayer, go to sleep, and André Luiz says in the book Evolution in Two Worlds, chapter 2, if we have the merit, which is not on us, if you say, I don't merit, please don't be God. Because God knows if we deserve it or not. But say, God, if you think I do, the good spirits are going to come and do true spiritual surgeries while we're sleeping. I don't need to take the plan and see John of God to be healed. No? That's the other part of our story as we wrap up. How does the healing happen from the perspective of those who are subjecting themselves as healing instruments? I brought two references so we can read further at home. One is from the book Paul and Stephen by Emmanuel. There is a moment that Paul himself healed a proconsul of the Roman Empire, Sergius Paulus. And there was a man who was one of his helpers, who was said to be a healing, or like a, whatever we name, let's kindly say, a healing medium. But he couldn't heal Sergius Paulus. Then Paul of Tarsus came and healed. One day, that man named Bar Jesus came to see Paul and said, how did you do it? What is your talisman? You know, my words will never do service to the description of it all. It says the following. He says, that's unbelievable, murmured the magician, eyes wide open. I was convinced that you had certain talismans which I was already ready to buy at any price. And Paul contemplated him with full pity for his ignorance. And the visitor continued, do you really do such deeds without resorting to sorcery? Paul of Tarsus looked at him more attentively and said, I know of only one sorcery that really works. And now everybody's like, oh my gosh, what is it? What is it? And that's the question he asked. What is it? Asked the magician with fiery, greedy eyes. Paul of Tarsus replies, faith in God and selflessness combined with selflessness. Is that it? And the story remains, and I read a little bit to see how delightful this book is. So easy to read and a joy. And Jesus, because we're going to wrap up with Jesus when we talk about this healing, how we subject ourselves to healing. In this book, Jesus in the home by the Spirit, Neo Lucium, because this is where the healing begins. We change our erroneous knowledge. These books change it. Chapter 22, the divine talisman. One day, you know, John and James had a mother, Isabel, and the wife of Zebedee. And everybody was mesmerized that Jesus healed the insane and the blind. And she said, just like Bar Jesus to Paul, she asked, Lord, might you be carrying some sort of talisman whose powers we can benefit from? Some kind of magical object that might help us? And I see many Spiritist groups that think that the talisman is in some other healing mediums elsewhere. But do you think God loves us less than people who are in Brazil and have 10,000 Spiritist centers? Well, 15,000 they say. No. Do you need to catch a plane and be there? No. According to these teachings, the healing is not external. Either for those who want to be healed or for those who want to be instruments of the healing. So Isabel, as the mother of John, the evangelist, his brother James, and all the others, everybody wanted to know, how do you do these healings, Master? Since you're a master, teach us. What is the talisman? Do you carry something special? And he explains to us. Jesus rested his piercing gaze on the woman and said, laughingly, but kind, okay? He was not being sarcastic. In fact, I do know of a talisman that has wondrous powers. By taking advantage of its miraculous resources, one can begin acquiring all of the blessings of our Father. It enables one to discover the treasures of love that shine around us and whose splendor we cannot see right away. It unveils understanding wherever discord punishes hearts. It opens the door to the revelations of art and science. It offers the possibility of radiant communion with the divine fountains of life. It invites the blessing of meditating on holy things. It reestablishes relations between conflicting parties. It discloses passages of light to minds lingering in darkness. It allows for the blessed spread of happiness. It is clothed in 1,000 opportunities for widespread peace. And he keeps going on. And then Isabel asks, what else does it do? And after smiling complacently, he continued, without this divine talisman, it is impossible to start any work of light and peace on earth. Then Isabel, the wife of Zebedee, is unsettled and she's like, Master, where can we get such a blessing? Tell us, we need this bringer of happiness. Then Christ, good-naturedly, answered, this blessed talisman, we're talking about healing, Isabel, is something we all have. Oh man, we all have. It is the time we are going through. Each minute of our soul is cloaked in prodigious hidden power when we learn how to use it for the infinite good. Because every rise and every fall, every victory and every defeat all begin with the collaboration of each day. Time is the divine talisman that we should avail ourselves of. So if we want to be instruments of the healing in our families, at work, in our communities, in our nation, when we use Facebook, we need to use our time wisely. When we say, I can't because I don't have time, we're telling ourselves, I'm not progressing. And I don't want to expand the progress to others. So Jesus tells to us that the mechanism of healing begins with the use of our time. Paul of Tarsus reinforces by referring to our need to be faithful to God and selfless. And in that manner, we can be able to be available to the good and loving spirits who are constantly trying to help us. In endless moments, the spirit doctors who are constantly trying to help us, and if we give of our time, they will do so. Right, friends? To see how Jesus used the time, we have 3 friends who are going to tell us, right, Shane? You're going to tell? Who is going to say first? Yeah. So we have 3 friends who will be able to tell us about Jesus' good use of his time. We've never heard Jesus saying, I don't have time for you. Mm-hmm. I don't have time for this. He always said, yes, I'll be there. And thus, he was able to perform, to be instrument of God's mercy and bring the healings that people were looking for. So, Daisy Gallen is going to be the first one to give to us a case on Jesus' healing.
Okay, good afternoon everyone, and thank you again for joining us. So now we are transitioning to I believe the last part of our first part of this treatment today. So if you go to the Genesis book by Kardec that we are studying, and you go to chapter 15, so it's part 2, miracles. And you go to chapter 15, I'm going to open right here. It talks about miracles in the gospel, and there is one section that talks all about the healings performed by Jesus. So if you look, it's very small description, so you think like, oh, it's, seems so simple, it's such a short, a few verses, but as you will see, it has such a profound teaching, and Jesus has our guide and model. He really, in every action, by the tone of his voice, by the way he talked to people, he was teaching us throughout. So we'll see very clearly with this case. So this case is called the healing of the blind man at Bethesda. So when Jesus came to this city called Bethesda, so not Bethesda, Maryland, Bethesda, all the way.
That one is bedside.
Bethsaida,
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Bethsaida. Yeah, I wasn't sure. How to pronounce it. Yeah, Bethsaida. So people in that village brought this blind man to Jesus and begged him to please touch his eyes so that he could see again. So Jesus did something very interesting, because where Jesus was visiting every city, people will come to him, will want to be healed. And with this particular man, he took him by the hand. So we'll go back to this and talk a little bit about what this meant. But he took this man by the hand and walked with him outside of this village. And that's where the healing took place. So he grabbed him by the hand, he led him outside of the village, and then he, used some salivas, he spit on his eyes, and then he put his hands on his eyes and he asked him, do you see anything? And at first the man said, I can see people, but they look like trees walking around. So for many of us that use glasses or contact lenses, think about it when you're without your glasses. You can see far away, right? You can see the shape of those who are around you. You can see their forms, but you cannot really tell very clearly, right, their faces, or you cannot distinguish. You might look at the television and it's like very blurry. So that's his first impression, what he saw. And then again, a second time, Jesus lays his hand on his eyes, and then his sight was restored. He could see clearly, crystal clear, very perfect. But that's not everything. So, has a doctor, right, has a very great doctor, when you're sick and you go to the doctor, before you go home, they send you home with a prescription, right? Something for you to continue the healing at home. Like, okay, what are the instructions? What do I need to follow? And Jesus did the same. Before, he went away, he gave him a very specific instruction that we together are gonna break it down here. So he told him, go home, but don't go into the village. So remember that he took him out of the village, right, to receive this treatment. So he gave him that instruction, go home, but don't go into the village. So at first, if you are thinking it literally, like if you're thinking about a house and a village, that may be a little bit hard to grasp. What did he mean with go home, but don't go? It's like, okay, let's go to our house, but don't go into our towns. Like, is that even possible? So we will break this down, because Jesus, with a lot of his teachings, we need to take a step back and don't see it literally what it means, because he taught us a lot with parables, right? So first, let's think about the home. What does the home means for us? And in this case, he was telling that man, well, you're queer, you were blind, now you can see. Go home. That means go back to your obligations, to your responsibilities. Each one of us here, we reincarnated with a purpose, right? We have a reincarnatory plan that most of us were invited to put together with the kind of benevolent spirits. What are our responsibilities on this life? What is our duty? And you might be thinking, but Daisy, I don't know, what is that? And this is something that no one is gonna tell you, oh, you should go to the right, you should take this path. But each one of us, we have an internal compass inside of us. And it is not easy, definitely, but that's where a lot of self-knowledge comes in. So our duty, our responsibility might be with our family, right? Might be with those that we reincarnated with. Like, why did I reincarnate in this family? I don't know. I don't fit on this family. Everyone is different. Like, why? And only you're gonna be able to tell that. Maybe it's the city that you live in. And you might ask yourself, I would like to be in Europe. I don't know. I'd like to be in Brazil. I want to be in California. California is so beautiful. But you are here, right? So is there a reason? And we learn with Spiritism then, you know, nothing in our lives happen without God's will and without a purpose. So this duty and this responsibility is really the circumstances that God put in our lives. And like I said, it would be different for each one of us. It might be a responsibility, a job that you have, your profession, you know, that might be your duty, maybe your spiritual work that you came here to do. And only by, you know, analyzing ourselves, thinking about ourselves, we will be able to decipher what is our duty in this reincarnation. So Jesus told the blind man, look, now that you're here, I'm not taking your responsibility out of it. You still have to go and continue with your life and fulfill your duties. You know, it's not because you're healed now that you're gonna be excused. You can go home and rest. You know, we just learn about the importance of service. So you're gonna fulfill your responsibilities. But then he added a second part. He said, don't go back to the village. And again, let's not think about the village as this physical village. We just heard from Carol and Vanessa about how our mind really literally creates our lives. And this village that Jesus was referring to is a mental village, is our mind. Because, as Vanessa beautifully explained to us, in order for us to be healed physically, at first, we need to heal our mind. So, how could the blind man continue to be healed if he will go back to continue having the same thought pattern, recurring in the same thought? So, this mental village, this village is what makes us blind. So you're going to be asking ourselves, so what is this village? What is this creating this blindness, right? And this blindness can be your spiritual blindness, right? Your purpose here can be a disease in your life that's manifested in your physical body. But let's talk a little bit more. What can be this? So we just heard about sentiments of, you know, hatred, resentment. We can go through our lives and, you know, someone might make some grave mistakes, a situation that we were put in, and years go by, months, years, and we're still stuck in that very moment. It's like you took a picture of that moment in your life, and every day you look at the picture. Oh, but someone did this to me. Oh, no, but they did this to me. Oh, no, but I'm in this situation now because of what happened then. Oh, because how can I move on with that person? And even though that situation may happen once, science proved to us, it's every time you remember that event in your life, that thought, your physical body reacts as if you were in that situation right now. So your physical body actually doesn't know that this was something that happened maybe 20 years ago. But for your physical body, it's the same. So something that happened once in your life, you keep revising it every day, and your mind's there. It's stuck in that moment. So for us to be healed, as Carol and Vanessa just mentioned to us, it really starts in the mind. It starts in our thought process. So throughout this story, Jesus throughout the whole case, he taught us through every action, and he gave us all the tips for us to go back to our duties, go back to our obligations, but change that thought process, change the way we see our lives. And he gave us really great instructions. So remember, he took the man by the hand, right? And for me, that's really beautiful because it reminds us actually that he's there. Jesus is here with all of us, and he will take us by the hand, and he will walk with us through every single step. And not only Jesus, but we have actually a group of spirits who work with Jesus. And how many spirit mentors and benefactors we have around us. And it's really a matter of connection. How you connect. Do you remember that you have someone that was assigned to you 24/7? It's, so easy to forget. Like, oh, I feel so alone. But do you know you have a guardian angel, a mentor that's by your side 24/7? Can you imagine a job 24/7? Right? And they do it with so much love and kindness. And they love when you ask for help. They love when you connect. Please help me, Or you wake up in the morning, you're like, please stay with me. Let me have a good day, that this can be a blessed day. And it's all we have to do is to connect, like the computer. You connect to the internet, you're connected. So that's all you have to do. So remind yourself, you're not alone. They are here. Jesus is here. God is here helping us, so we can do it. Then he left the village, right? Remember, he took him, he walked with him, he took him outside the village. And that means that for us to get out of that, to be truly healed, as Vanessa just mentioned to us, it's going to require a lot of work and dedication. And not only through words, we can read, which wonderful, we can read all the Spirit's books. But if we go outside the Spirit Center and we continue our lives as nothing had changed, we're not going to be healed. So we really have to walk like Jesus did with this man, to get outside of that quote-unquote village service, help those, put in practice what each of us are learning here, because that's the only way. The third teaching is that, remember at first, the man who could only see far away, right? I call it half blind. So that means that the healing process is not instantaneously. It is, the physical manifestation might be like, oh, you're cured, I don't have any. But it's a process. It takes time, it's gradually. Because everything, right? Everything in nature is gradually, right? You see, now we're in the fall, you see the leaves like slowly, right? You walk by the tree one day, it's like a little bit. And then you walk the next day, and it's already like more trees are becoming yellow. And then the next day, the next week, the whole tree. So it's gradually. So the process that we are going through is gradually. And we have to learn in this process to forgive ourselves. Okay, for example, let's talk about forgiveness, right? That's such a I think one of the hardest teachings that Jesus brought to us, right? How can we forgive? So we're there, okay, I'm going to practice forgiving. And then you're driving, and someone cuts in front of you. You're like so mad, and you're like, oh, how can you step? And you're like, no, right? It's okay. Let's try again tomorrow, And it's gradually. We know we're going to have to go through this process, and it's not going to be easy, but we have to learn how to forgive ourselves too. to continue moving on. And then last but not least, the man could see far away. He was healed. But as Vanessa just talked to us, when he saw everything very clearly, we only gonna be able to heal ourselves when we understand that we're not this physical body. This is not it. This is not the only reincarnation, you know. We're all immortal spirits. So when we look, someone that had, remember, that grave mistake, they commit a grave mistake to us, and we look at them with a different eyes. They are learning too. You know, yes, they did commit that, but they don't know what they're doing. Because Jesus looks at us and he already sees us perfect. He doesn't see our flaws. He doesn't see our mistake. He sees, and God sees us perfect. So once we have that understanding and that discernment, and we look for those people in our lives, in the situation in our lives, thinking that this is passing. We are here. We're eternal spirits. We are in the process of evolving. We start to see the situation in our lives and the things in our lives with a different kind of eyes, with different lenses. And when we do have that understanding and that discernment, I think that's when we will be completely healed. So, to wrap up today, again, we're being invited by Jesus to leave this village. So let's leave this mental village that we're in. That situation in your life, that thought pattern. He's inviting us. Let's walk with me. I will take you. Let's go back. Remember, you reincarnated. You have a list of things that you have to check. But you can do it. I'm here by your side. So he's inviting us for that walk, and I hope we together can continue on. And I will invite our next friend.
As I get ready here, let's experience the miracle of movement. Stand up.
Yeah.
Muscle and bones working together and articulate if you need to. For the ones who are on the internet, we are seated in heart chairs. So I'm just asking people to stretch it a little bit, a few minutes until I get to the same presentation. It's a separate one. It's a separate one. I got it.
You separate?
So, which one is yours? She sent me separate. This one. Before she starts, I'll just mention that these healings are in the chapter, just for reference. So it's chapter 15 of the book Genesis, and there are 9 cases of healings that Kardec brought to us, of Jesus' healings in the as described in the New Testament. Today, unfortunately, we don't have time to go through 3 of them, but the 3 joyful examples that we had, so I'm going to have Paloma come and present hers. You can, too much technology, but you can use this to pass or there, and there's also a timer.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And it's a good reminder that we're talking about healings that, you know, is in the Bible. So if you want to read more, you can go actually in the Bible and look at the stories. But we are bringing it with the Spiritist perspective in healings, right? When we were reading before, without the Spirited teachings, we were considering these things miracles. And now that we understand the mechanisms of healing, it actually empowers us to look for our own healing. So let's go through this beautiful story. And I'll tell the story first, and then we'll go back and revisit the main points. So the title is The Loss of Blood, but the translation is a little bit different in English than what I've seen. What it really, the title in Portuguese, it relates more to a normal women's cycle that doesn't stop. It's the loss of blood. So there was this woman, and she was afflicted for 12 years with the loss of blood. 12 years. And she suffered much going to doctors. She spent everything she had, and nothing helped her affliction. She heard about Jesus, and there was this big crowd around him, and she just pushed through and went to touch the bottom of his garments. Like, she was just reaching. And while she's reaching for it, she thought, if I could only touch his garment, I would be healed. So as she's reaching there, she is thinking that. She touches it. Jesus felt it immediately. The bleeding stopped right away. And Jesus turned around and said, "Who touched my garments?" And the description is that he felt that power had gone out of him. So he felt, when we're talking about power had gone out of him, he felt the energy exchange, right? He felt the fluid exchange. So he looked around, asking, "Who touched me? Who touched me?" You know? And the disciples are like, "Master, there's so many people around here. Everybody's touching you." They were almost like, "That what type of question is that? Because everybody's touching you." They're like, "Who touched you, everybody?" And the woman, of course, is feeling an enormous amount of fear. And Jesus is asking, "Who touched me? Who touched me?" And she's quiet. And she, doesn't want to say. And then she eventually said, "I touched you." And Jesus looked at her and said, "My daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be healed of your illness." So, when the couple points that let's think about first of the times back then that was very hard for women. And if women, and I guess now it's all women, women had their 7 days that they were considered impure. They couldn't be touched by anybody if they were in their monthly cycle. And if anybody touched that woman, there was a cleaning ritual back in those times, right? It was very hard. Now, if it was hard on a monthly basis, imagine 12 years of this. So what seems like, okay, she had, a little bit of blood, but no, it's 12 years of it. And blood is life, right? Blood is life. We need blood to live. So 12 years of it is almost like it's life leaving your body. She was desperate. She was losing life every single minute, and she could feel it to the point that she couldn't handle it anymore. And despite her fears, her lack of resources, she's just wanting to give a last exchange. And that's where Jesus says, your faith has saved you. Because if you're home and you're feeling it, right? And actually I heard this explanation that I thought it was interesting. That there was a dog laying down and whining. And this person saw the dog and said, why is the dog whining? And they said, oh, because the dog is sitting on a nail. And the person was like, what? On a nail? Why doesn't the dog get up? And the person said, because it doesn't hurt enough to make that person leave, the dog leave. Right? So let's go back to this woman. For 12 years it hurt. But it didn't hurt enough to the point that made her take that leap. And it doesn't come from Jesus. Jesus is there. Right? Jesus is there. It needed her to take that action and actually make it happen. And the mechanisms is the fluid exchange with Jesus. Jesus with his perfect, environment, aura, soul, when she touched his garment, it was almost like she sucked that fluid. That's the description. She sucked it, and he healed what she had to be healed. But when he says your faith saved you, okay, physically, she was healed immediately. He said her bleeding stopped. But it's beyond the physical. Because when he says your faith has saved you, is the true healing that happened inside of her. It's not like the bleeding is going to stop and then it's going to come back, because it wasn't internal. For her, that moment was a true moment of healing beyond the physical. So it is important for us to reflect on what this woman did to get true healing, because we are all looking for it, right? We feel it in the body because our alarm system goes off saying something's happening. You have a pain, you have aches, you could have more severe issues. Those are alarm system. And then this woman was actually able to go over the hump and find true healing. So what did she do to receive healing? Active faith. And when we say active, it's true active, like meaning movement. Because again, she could have stayed at home for I don't know how much longer, and who knows if she would have received healing. We need to be active in looking for, to do good, to progress. If we just pray and really hope for a miracle, it might not come. It requires work, it requires effort, and just doing nothing's not going to happen. Even if sometimes, we know of people that go to sometimes the Spirit Center, see a healing medium, they feel better right away. And not too long after, they're feeling the aches and pains again. And why? It's because they're lacking the active faith. They just want the quick fix. That's not going to heal. True healing takes, work. Courage. It required courage because she was in the middle of a crowd that thought that just getting close to her, they would be impure. And if you hear about the description of the cleaning of the impurities, I think it's way worse than anything else, So it required a lot of courage for her to leave her house, to expose herself, and to take that leap of faith. No matter what, I'm going to do this. And I really don't care what people are going to think. She did something
that was very courageous. And with that, it required determination, right? She, with all those people there, in the crowd, and I can only imagine the crowds that came to see Jesus, that she was trying to reach in whatever she could get. She got, a little piece of his garment, and that was sufficient for her to be able to connect with him and receive the fluids that she needed to help her body. And she trusted in God. She felt that if she got close to him, it would happen. Deep in her, she knew, right? She had the faith, she had the courage, she had the determination that if she got close to Jesus, it was going to happen. And it did. Jesus felt it. That he was looking. Who sucked the energy in a good way, right? He's happy. He felt it. So I think she brings to us a lot of teachings in how do we look for the healing? How should we, try to help others? Because you might have people around you that are going through this. Now they're having deep questions in why do I have this? Why do I feel like this? Or they feel immobilized. Depression is a good example where they are home. They know things, but they cannot act on it. And this is the type of teachings that really empower us. That if we're able to share, we could do a whole lot of good for ourselves and for our community.
Thank you, Paloma. Now I'm going to invite Luciana to come over here for our last case of the day, encouraging everybody who is watching us to go to the book, part 2, chapter 15, and get the information right from the source.
So, hello everyone. Look at this beautiful imaging of a natural spring that still exists on earth. And the case that Jesus healing today is reporting to us is the paralytic of the pool of Bethesda. Now it's Bethesda. And it's very interesting to see that even then, in the past, people were like, oh, those are healing pools. So here's where it was. Here's the temple, the pool of Bethesda in Jerusalem. And as a Jew, they used to go at least 3 times a year to Jerusalem to worship. So Jesus, one time, he was going to Jerusalem to pray, to do his devotion and be there with his disciple. He walked by this pool and he decided to go inside. So he went inside, and this is the picture of one movie that is already exists about all the healings of Jesus, the miracle healings of Jesus. And he went there and he saw a lot of people there like trying to get bathed on this water, because would say to us that those spring, when it's bubbling, the first person that go immerse into this water will be healed for anything that they had. So many people that were there, especially blind people, people that couldn't walk or that were missing part of their bodies, they were there waiting to be helped, waiting to be cured. And then Jesus made this important question to this man that was sitting there for 38 years. Do you want to be healed? And it's very important to us to remind us that Jesus never ever said that I am healing you. He always asks, do you want to be healed? And why does he make this question this way? Because we already heard from all of people that were here before saying that the healing comes from the inside. The healing comes on our thoughts. And if we know that we're going to the wrong directions, we need help. So we are there committing sins and going to the wrong directions, and that's why it starts showing in our bodies all the problems that we can have in a physical body. But we know it comes from the spirits, it comes from the mind. So Jesus was always asking if we really want to be healed. Because many people, like this man, were there sitting and waiting to be healed, but they don't really want it to be healed. And as an analogy, while I was studying, I was saying that our spiritual centers are like those pools. Because people go there all the time trying to be cured, trying to receive help. And they come and they sit and they listen to, they get directions to change their mind. But when Jesus asked this question, just like he asked to this man, we always have an excuse because his answer was not right away, yes, I want to be healed. His first answer was, but man, there is no one here that can take me to the pool. So I'm here, I cannot move. I cannot make to the pool because everybody else will go to the pool first. And I'm here waiting. So when he gives this answer, we know that we do those answers as well. When we go to the center, get knowledge, get to know what to do, the first thing that we do, we have excuses in our lives. We don't take the teachings and change. We keep saying like, oh, but nobody's here to help me. But who is there to help you? Yourself. And Allan Kardec, in his book, very wisely, the Spirit's book, on question and answer 909, I believe, he asked, can a man heal itself without help of anybody? And he said, yes, but it depends on its will. So if we have the will that we wanted to change, we will heal ourselves. This is all that we need. We need to have the will. Because nowadays we have Spiritism, many books, as we are celebrating 150 years of the Genesis. And this is not our first reincarnation. We have many years, many millennia of years. We're being reborn and trying to heal ourselves. That's why we reincarnate, to heal ourselves. So as we are born and we get more knowledge, because like committing sins is just to deter for the right. And Jesus is our guide and model, that he came on earth and showed us what to do. So when Jesus were next to this man, he was there telling him that you know inside of you what you need to do. You have the power to heal yourself, not me. So do you want to be healed? And he's like, oh, there's nobody here to help me. And then he asks again, do you want to be healed? You stand up and go. Take your mat and go. And he's saying, it was mentioned before, you are not excused of your responsibilities. You get up and you go and do all that you still have to be doing on your life. But don't go back to the same mindset, because if you go back to the same mindset, the same thing is going to happen again, because you need to really change. So then the Jews were really after Jesus because he was healing people on Saturday. And we're not supposed to do healing on Saturdays, right? So as this man walked out of the pool, he met with some Jews. They were celebrating this part. That's why Jesus also went up to Jerusalem and said, "What are you doing with your mat in your hands? You're not supposed to carry anything today." And then he says, "Well, but the man that healed me said, 'Take your mat and go, because you're healed.'" So he kept going, and he didn't know who was the man because they were asking, like, "Who are these men?" Like, we wanted to know. And then as he walked, he's like, "I don't know, but that's what he told me. That's what I'm doing." So later on, Jesus have another encounter with this man, and he said, like, "Oh, I see that you're healed. Don't make the same mistakes, because worse things can happen to you." And then the man turned around and told that, like, Jesus cured me. But he knew, Jesus knew, like, it was not me. You changed when I approached you and said, "Do you want to be changed? Stand up and go." Inside of us, inside of this man, there was a change. Because he was there, like, suffering for 38 years. But when he looked at Jesus' eyes, and when he asked one more time, he felt that, like, I have the answer inside of me. I will take responsibility and change my life and go out and start making this new life that I want for my life. So it's very important for us to remember that doing sin, doing wrong, is just like deterring for the target, the good thing that Jesus wants us to do. Because we are here on evolution, we are here to be better. So we are on earth to progress. And if we're starting doing things that are not good, we're just like this man. Because we are spiritists. We are going to the pool of Bethesda. We are receiving the tools and everything that we need to take us out of the ignorance. We know now. There are many brothers and sisters of us that doesn't know yet. But we here know exactly what we need to do. But I really like this man looking at the pool and don't moving forward because we're like, I need someone, putting the blame on somebody else. Because that's what we do every day, right? We always look around to find who can I blame and don't take the responsibility. So Spiritism come to us to give us back the responsibility. It's all in our hands. It's all in our will. If we do it, if we really want to dip inside, we will be able to heal ourselves. And I just want to finish with this, that Jesus still heals us because Jesus is inside of us. He's our model. So when we say Jesus still heals us, it's because he is there like to show us how to go through life. He gave us all the model, all the pathway, all the examples, just like those healings here, to teach and reinforce to us what to do. But it depends on us. So we have the power, if we have the willing, we will cure ourselves for anything. But we just need to stop giving excuses. So now we will proceed to the healing sections.
Thank you, Luciana. Can I borrow your Genesis? Thank you. So before we break down, there are friends who are asking us, and if we go to the book Genesis, okay, it's a study book, okay? We have two parts. Part one is the Genesis. It talks about God, good and evil, etc., etc. Now, the second part is titled Miracles. And Shane Martin summarized very well the first chapter in that part 2, which is chapter 13, Miracles. The second part was done by Carol. She talked about the fluids, the thoughts. Thought is life. And then our part, the healings, and the cases on Jesus' healings that Daisy, Paloma, and Luciana explained can be found later in chapter 15 mainly, because it talks about the different cases here. The last part of the book Genesis, which is part 3, is about the predictions, which is very interesting because many people nowadays think the end of the world is coming. So it's a good book to read if we don't understand the battle of good and evil, if we think the world's going to end. Kardec addressed it way before it came to life, the discussion, currently speaking. And this is the book. So we talked about the Spiritist view. Even the healing cases that Luciana, Daisy, and Paloma were discussing, they bring the Spiritist view on the cases. You know, we go beyond the simple understanding of the healing itself, but to the core message of it all. So now, as we were discussing, we're going to do a short prayer just to finalize the broadcasting also with our friends over the internet, because the second part is going to be here local, we cannot broadcast. But if you stay praying, of course, even if we turn off, we'll spend the next minutes or so doing the spiritual treatment here. If you stay home, saying your prayer, put your glass of water, you bet that the good spirits can go anywhere you need, okay? I remember recently talking to Ricardo Melo, who is a healing medium, without a doubt. I asked for his help for a friend who needed help, and he was in Brazil, and the person was here. I said, you know, I know you're going to go through a healing treatment there. And he said, you know, just ask for the person to be praying during that time for the next days or so. And it happened. And it's not the first case that I hear in that regard, with different mediums. So you don't need to take a plane, you just need to get out of the mental village. As Daisy said, and Luciana wrapped up quite well, Jesus still heals. It's up to us, okay, friends? So let us just close the physical eyes, keep our hearts open, and feel the blessings that come to us constantly. Dear Lord, we feel deep gratitude for the joy of living, for the joy of existing. You know, we are your children, but we feel like rough diamonds, yet to shine in the light you've created us with. But we are happy to keep refining ourselves, trusting that sooner than later we will be allowing your divine light in us shine easily without obstacles, to bring clarity, illumination, warmth, kindness, most of all, love, which is the true nourishment for our souls. We kindly ask you for a moment of break as we prepare ourselves to transition to the spiritual treatment. May the good and loving messengers of yours who are here present, the spirit doctors, nurses, and therapists, find in us a faithful soul with true courage, determination, and trust in you. With your permission, we wrap up this first part of our study session. And so